A plenary session to pass the 2026 budget is taking place at the National Assembly as we come on air. This is the first time in 5 years that lawmakers will have met the legal deadline for budget approval. Ahead of the first anniversary of the votes to martial law by former President Yoon, President Lee Jae-myung on Tuesday vowed to drive out what he called the darkness of insurrection. The South Korean leader is set to deliver a special statement on Wednesday. A massive data breach attack against e-commerce giant Coupang lasted for 6 months from June this year, involving the exploitation of the firm's electronic signature key. Authorities are still on the hunt for a suspect. Today is the deadline for South Korea's budget bill for next year to be passed. And the National Assembly has opened a plenary session today to put it to a vote. As the first annual budget bill under the Lee Jae-myung administration, all eyes are on how the vote will unfold. For more, we are joined by our political correspondent, Moon Hae-ryun. Welcome, Hae-ryun.
Thanks for having me, Tammy.
So about the vote that's about to be unfolded tonight, what can you tell us?
So the plenary session was due to begin just a few moments ago at 8 p.m. and it's widely expected that the budget bill will come to pass. And this is because the ruling Democratic Party and the main opposition People Power Party have been at odds over various aspects of the bill. But following a series of meetings between the floor leaders, they managed to reach an agreement earlier today to process the bill at the session. It was reported that the two rival parties agreed to cut roughly 4.3 trillion Korean won, or around $2.9 billion from various sections within the government's original proposal, and to increase funding only within the scope of that cut, meaning that the overall scale of the budget bill will stay at a record 728 trillion won, just under $500 billion. They agreed not to reduce budget allocations for key national agenda items of the Lee Jae-myung administration, such as support for issuing local gift certificates and the National Growth Fund, while cutting some funding from AI-related support programs, policy funds, and reserve budget items. Increases will be made to several areas, such as funding for national scholarships and building a recovery system for the National Information Resources Service following a major fire back in September that caused widespread disruption to core national IT services.
Then, Hae-ryun, tell us more about the process over the next few weeks leading up to the vote tonight. What were the main points of contention between lawmakers?
So the legal deadline for the budget every single year falls on December 2nd,
right.
And that's because the Constitution dictates that it must be processed at least 30 days before the next fiscal year starts, which is January the 1st. But because the budget has always been a highly contentious piece of legislation, this is the first time in 5 years that lawmakers will process it by the legal deadline if the bill passes by midnight. And here's what the floor leaders had to say.
What matters now is execution. This budget must improve people's daily lives, and the Democratic Party will take full responsibility. We'll do our best to make today's budget the starting point for tomorrow's change.
Given the importance of livelihood-related budgets, we ask for your understanding that we agree broadly to pass the budget by the deadline.
So the scale of the budget itself has been a key topic of debate as the largest annual budget in South Korea's history. As a result, the expansionary fiscal policy of the administration has been a key area of conflict between the ruling Democratic Party and the main opposition People Power Party, accusing each other of engaging in populism. Lawmakers also focused on President Lee's key policy pledges, such as a rural basic income that provides regular monetary handouts to all residents living in rural areas, regardless of their job, income, or age.
I see. Now, aside from next year's budget, Hae-ryun, what other bills are on the agenda?
So aside from next year's budget, lawmakers are also facing a long list of reform and budget-related bills that didn't make it to last Thursday's session. And among them are amendments to the Corporate Tax Act and the Education Tax Act, previously major sticking points which are now expected to pass as originally proposed by the Democratic Party and the government. The changes include include a uniform 1 percentage point increase in corporate tax rates across all brackets and a hike in the education tax on financial and insurance firms earning more than 1 trillion won in profits, raising the rate from 0.5 to 1%. Another plenary session is set for Thursday, where the DP plans to push a bill that would allow the National Speakers Assembly to hold a filibuster if fewer than 60 lawmakers are present, along with several other contentious measures.
Well, for now, we'll keep an eye out to tonight's bill and also the upcoming plenary session later this week. Hae-ryun, thanks for coming in tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Now, in other news, ahead of the one-year anniversary of the martial law incident, President Lee Jae-myung has once again vowed to go after those who led the incident and punish them in the name of national unity. Our presidential office correspondent Yoon reports.
Rooting out the remnants of last year's military rule was among the key topics at Tuesday's cabinet meeting, ahead of the first anniversary of the December 3rd martial law declaration by former President Yoon.
여기서 멈추지 말아야겠습니다. 곳곳에 숨겨진 내란의 어둠을 온전히 밝혀내서 진정으로 정의로운 국민 통합의 문을 활짝 열어야 합니다.
He sent a similar message the previous day, revisiting his will to make sure any remnants related to the short-lived military rule would not go unpunished. As the president reiterated a no-tolerance principle when it comes to investigating the incident, he instructed his justice minister to speed up reintroducing a bill aimed at eliminating the statute of limitations for state violence, which was vetoed by the previous administration. At the same time, he called for leniency for those who turned themselves in or who were forced into it.
이게 적당히 덮어놓는 게 통합은 아니라고 생각이 돼요. 대신에 그렇다고 해서 그걸 극렬하게 과혹하게 하자는 건 또 아니잖아요. 자발적으로 신고하는 경우는 책임을 감면하는 거를 방침을 좀 정하십시오.
President Lee Jae-myung once again noted South Korea's democratic resilience, stressing efforts by the people who stood up against the martial law on the night it was declared.
비상계엄 저지와 헌정질서 수호에 함께한 국민들에게 표창 등 의미 있는 증서를 수여하고 그날의 국민적 노고와 국민주권 정신을 대대로 기억하기 위한 방안을 마련해 나갈 생각입니다.
On December 3rd, Lee will deliver a special statement and hold a press conference with foreign media outlets. Later in the evening, he will join a march with the people, calling for an end to insurrection. Both liberals and conservatives plan to organize separate rallies on Wednesday. Yoon, Arirang News.
Also at today's cabinet meeting, relevant ministries briefed President Lee Jae-myung on the ongoing follow-up negotiations for the joint fact sheet between South Korea and the United States. Our top office correspondent Seongnam has the details.
President Lee Jae-myung has drawn a clear line that South Korea has no intention to build nuclear weapons.
핵무장을 만약에 하는 상황이 벌어지면 이게 일단 미국이나 국제사회의 동의를 받는 건 불가능하고 그러면 경제 제재, 국제 제재가 바로 뒤따르는데 그 우리가 견뎌낼 수 있습니까?
His remarks came at Tuesday's cabinet meeting where ministers briefed him on follow-up measures to last month's South Korea-U.S. joint fact sheet.
We will establish a whole-of-government coordination system for nuclear-powered submarines and begin swift follow-up consultations with the United States. As a model non-proliferation nation, we will fully respect the NPT regime and maintain close cooperation with the IAEA.
President Lee acknowledged that some discussions with the U.S. on reprocessing spent nuclear fuel and uranium enrichment have not progressed as smoothly as expected, partly due to political concerns within Washington about South Korea possibly pursuing nuclear arms. He stressed that nuclear armament is, quote, unrealistic, especially considering the consequences Seoul would face. Turning to the trade side, Lee urged ministries to set firm safeguards around South Korea's $350 billion investment pledge to the U.S.
사업에 대한 투자가 혹시라도 투자 원리금을 환수하기 어렵거나 이익이 제대로 나지 않는 그런 데 투자되지 않게 막는 거죠. 이게 국민의 혈세인데.
Last month, the ruling Democratic Party submitted a special bill to create a strategic fund and a Korea-U.S. Strategic Investment Corporation to manage the pledge. Given the legislative process and consultations with the U.S., detailed project negotiations are expected to begin early next year. Meanwhile, the industry ministry reported progress on Washington's promise to reduce tariffs on South Korea imports from 25% to 15%.
We were informed earlier this morning that the U.S. government will publish a Federal Register notice formalizing the tariff reductions on auto parts, lumber products, and aircraft components on Wednesday morning U.S. time, which will be Wednesday afternoon Korea time.
Kim added that Seoul aims to secure additional tariff exemptions for generic pharmaceuticals and certain natural resources by convening a Korea-U.S. FTA joint committee meeting within this year. 송유진, Arirang News.
So tomorrow, the nation marks the first anniversary of the brief military rule imposed by former President Yoon Suk-yeol. The political turmoil has left scars on the South Korean economy. And now, is the country's economy still limping or ready to move forward? Our economics correspondent Park Jun-an tells us more.
South Korea is again starting to see signs of an economic recovery after a series of events behind major uncertainties, such as the shift of power due to the failed martial law declaration and the finalization of tariff negotiations. The Bank of Korea has since projected South Korea's growth rate to be 1% this year and 1.8% in 2026. Next year's projected growth rate is higher due to a recovery in domestic demand and resilient exports, particularly semiconductors. The International Monetary Fund has also raised its next year's growth projection for South Korea to 1.8%, following this year's forecast of a 0.9% increase. South Korea's quarter-on-quarter GDP saw a contraction in the first quarter of 2025, but has since started to rebound. Also, over the past year, South Korea's consumer sentiment has kept growing since hitting 88.2 points last December due to Yoon's brief imposition of martial law. The Composite Consumer Sentiment Index, which is considered optimistic when above 100, surpassed the threshold in May and has continued to climb. In November, it reached 112.4, marking the highest level in 8 years.
As uncertainties eased after the end of martial law and expectations of economic recovery began to form, consumer sentiment appears to be rising as well.
South Korea's benchmark Kospi has also seen a sharp rise of over 66% in 2025, especially after the new government took office in June. The index increase reflects the government's strong policy to shift money flows from being heavily focused on the real estate market to the stock market. Along with the finalized tariff negotiations with the U.S. and the strong performance of AI-related and export-focused stocks, the Kospi has recorded the highest increase among major global indices. However, despite the improvements in economic conditions over the past year, there are still some concerns that South Korea needs to address to move forward. Data from the Bank of Korea and the Bank for International Settlements shows that the Korean won, compared to major trading partner currencies, fell to its weakest level in 16 years and 2 months as of late October. Also, the $1 exchange rate is now trading in the level of 1,471 per US dollar, which saw an increase of 6.2% in 6 months and a 32.7% increase over 5 years.
It's been quite some time since U.S. interest rates surpassed those of Korea. And because many Korean companies now have more reasons to invest in the U.S., the profits they earn from exports are not being remitted back home. Along with Korean investors increasing their investments in overseas stocks, these factors have reduced the supply of dollars while increasing demand.
The Lee Jae-myung administration's expansionary fiscal policy has helped boost the country's economy, but at the same time, it has put pressure on the accelerating national debt. For example, the budget for next year, set at 728 trillion won, is 8.1% higher than last year's budget. Also, it is widely expected that the country will see an even higher annual national debt with the issuance of at least 100 trillion won worth of bonds. But experts here say where and how to allocate money is more important than the absolute amount of the budget.
In the end, it all comes down to where the money is spent and how effectively it's used to serve as the catalyst we want. Fiscal policy requires very specific targeted spending. So if those measures work well, it can be very positive. But if not, concerns over the country's growing debt will only deepen.
In 2025, South Korea navigated domestic and international uncertainties while establishing and implementing a new national agenda. As 2026 approaches, eyes are on whether the Lee administration's fiscal push will deliver sustained growth and bring stability to the volatile foreign exchange market. Park Junan, Arirang News.
Shifting gears, President Lee Jae-myung has proposed restoring communication channels with North Korea to end hostility. Speaking today at a launch ceremony for the Advisory Council on Peaceful Unification, the president noted that resuming dialogue with Pyongyang would be a starting point for a peaceful coexistence of the two Koreas. Now, inter-Korean dialogue has been stalled for 7 years. As he called for a reunification of the Korean peninsula a must, he reiterated that he opposed any form of unification by absorption. The massive personal information breach at South Korea's retail giant Coupang dragged down the firm's stock price more than 5% on the New York Stock Exchange on Monday. While chasing a suspect still, authorities have learned the breach began back in June. Cha Yoon-kyung reports.
Police in Seoul are stepping up their investigation into the massive data breach at e-commerce giant Coupang, saying they have now secured the internet protocol address used by the suspect and are tracing their movements. Authorities say the breach began in June and ultimately exposed the personal information of nearly 34 million customers. Coupang revealed the scale of the breach on Saturday, identifying a former employee, a Chinese national who has already left South Korea, as the person responsible. An official with the Seoul Metropolitan Police told reporters on Monday that investigators are analyzing server logs submitted by Coupang. They confirmed that the IP address used in the intrusion has been secured and that officers are now working to locate the suspect. Authorities are coordinating with related ministries to prepare for possible follow-up crimes, given the scale of the leaked information. At the center of the investigation is a critical piece of internal infrastructure. Logging into Coupang's internal systems requires a token that serves as a digital access card. That token must be validated by an access token signing key, a kind of secret seal that ensures the token is legitimate and not forged. Experts believe the former employee may have exploited a vulnerability in which the signing key was not updated or revoked even after the employee left the company. Coupang has rejected claims that the signing key was left unattended for as long as 5 to 10 years, but the company declined to offer further details, citing the ongoing investigation. Meanwhile, Coupang's stock price plunged more than 5% on the New York Stock Exchange on Monday local time, following a massive personal information breach. The aftermath of the incident negatively affected investor sentiment on the U.S. stock market, further fueling a sharp decline in share prices. The incident has also reignited debate over Coupang Incorporation's founder and board chairman, Kim Bum-seok. Kim holds over 70% of the company's voting rights, yet he has repeatedly avoided attending National Assembly hearings. In November last year, he cashed out a staggering 484.6 billion won after converting his shares and selling them. Despite generating most of its revenue in Korea through a growing base of Korean consumers, Coupang has been criticized for shirking its social responsibilities by citing its status as a U.S. corporation listed on the U.S. stock market. Cha Yoon-kyung, Arirang News.
South Korea's consumer prices have grown over the central bank's target in November for a third consecutive month, maintaining the same 2.4% pace as the previous month. Yoon explains.
Exceeding the Bank of Korea's 2% target, South Korea's consumer prices grew 2.4% on-year in November. This is according to data released by the Ministry of Data and Statistics on Tuesday, which shows that consumer prices, a key gauge of inflation, have maintained the same pace of increase as the previous month. Looking at the year 2025, inflation remained above 2% from January through April, before slowing to 1.9% in May, but rose back above 2% in both June and July. The rate dropped to 1.7% in August, but rose to over 2% again in September and October. The government says last month's increase was largely due to a sharp rise in prices of agriculture, livestock, and fishery products, which jumped 5.6% on year. Petroleum prices jumped 5.9%, marking the highest rate of increase since February. A ministry official noted that these are goods most sensitive to foreign currency changes. The high exchange rate has visibly driven up costs for imported essentials, such as petroleum products, food, and raw materials. The Korean won has been among the world's weakest performing currencies over the past year. The Lifestyle Price Index, which tracks frequently purchased goods and services, climbed 2.9%. This marks the steepest increase in 1 year and 4 months, specifically since July of last year. Prices of industrial goods increased 2.3%, while electricity, gas, and water rates rose 0.4%. Impact factors include a strong U.S. dollar and currency volatility, but also unfavorable weather conditions, of which the government says it will remain vigilant and will respond swiftly to manage stable prices. 이은진, Arirang News.
South Korea's city of Seongnam is hosting a climate technology fair aimed at boosting innovation and supporting emerging climate tech industries. Our Moon Jiang was there.
Climate change is no longer a future concern. It is a pressing present reality, disrupting cities and daily life. The city of Seongnam, located in the Seoul metropolitan area, is positioning itself at the forefront of climate tech innovation. On Tuesday, the city opened the 2025 Seongnam Climate Tech Conference and Fair, a two-day event hosted by Seongnam City and organized by the Seongnam Industry Promotion Agency. Officials there outlined the vision of building a climate tech ecosystem grounded in public-private cooperation and technological innovation.
Seongnam seeks solutions to the climate crisis through cutting-edge technologies and broad cooperation. Our strength lies in the innovation built by our citizens, companies, and public institutions. Real change begins when citizens' participation, corporate ambition, and public responsibility come together. Today, we officially declare Seongnam's vision as a special city for climate tech.
Setting the tone for this year's discussions, the former chair of the UN IPCC stressed that near-term emissions cuts are crucial to preventing severe long-term warming.
We must reduce CO2 immediately, not to lower today's temperatures, but to prevent the sharp rise expected later this century. And going forward, we will need technologies that remove carbon already in the atmosphere through capture and long-term storage or reuse. The earlier we act, the smaller the burden and cost will be in the decades ahead.
Seongnam is already moving in that direction. This year, the Seongnam Industry Promotion Agency made climate tech a core strategic sector and launched new SME support programs. Though only in its first year, the initiative has already drawn strong participation from local firms. As the city works to position itself as a climate tech hub, this year's event is expected to highlight how local innovation can drive broader climate action. Moon Jiang, Arirang News.
Right at the very beginning of winter, the cold feels bitter across the country. Even in the afternoon, with strong cold winds, the temperature only stayed at 2 degrees Celsius in Seoul. Therefore, the first cold wave advisory of this season was issued in Seoul along with other central regions and northern parts of Gyeongsangbuk-do province. Tomorrow, the morning temperature will drop by more than 10 degrees Celsius in most areas, with temperatures falling to -8 degrees Celsius in Seoul. Even in the middle of the day, it will be -3 degrees Celsius, and sub-zero cold will continue throughout the day. Most areas will start off at below 0 degrees, with Chuncheon at -11, Daejeon at -7 degrees. Daily highs will rise to 3 degrees in Gwangju and Daegu, 7 degrees in Busan. The first snow of this winter is expected in Seoul on Thursday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all we have for tonight. I'm Kim Dami. From all of us here at Arirang, thanks for watching and good night.